Bukan HP biru.
Udah gitu.
Jam 1.
Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat datang para peserta webinar siang hari ini. Mungkin kami menunggu sekitar 5 menit lagi kah? Atau Pak Alki sudah di Zoom?
Ya, Mbak, saya sudah hadir. Halo, Nisa, Bapak Ibu sekalian.
Terima kasih Pak Alki sudah bersedia di sela-sela turun lapangannya ya, lagi di Ambon ya Pak.
Iya, benar. Terima
Nanti
kasih.
kalau dibantu oleh teman dari tim acara kami, mohon diinfokan ya Pak ya.
Oh ya, baik. Terima kasih. Oke.
Kalau Ibu Karola nanti baru bisa bergabung sekitar pukul 2 siang.
Oke. Baik.
Kita mulai saja ya. Sudah pukul 13.30, pas. Baik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, Bapak Alkis, Lukman, our presenter today. Good afternoon, everyone, Bapak Ibu and all the participants, and good morning for Professor Karola. Welcome to our today's webinar with the title Urban Heritage. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Koirunisa Nur Syahid from Research Center for Area Studies BRIN, and I will be the moderator on our webinar today. And I would like to inform you that our today webinar will have something special because the Leiden University in Indonesia will give 3 books for participants who have interesting questions to our speakers. So hopefully our discussion today will lively. And before we start our discussion, I am glad to welcome our speakers, Bapak Alkis Lukman from Research Center for Environmental Archaeology, Maritime Archaeology and Cultural Sustainability BRIN, and also Professor Dr. Engineering Carola Hein from Department of Architecture at TU Delft University, who will join with us later on 2 p.m. And for your information, our today's webinar is a part of second BRIN-LDE Academy 2023, the Smart, Sustainable, and Healthy City in Indonesia. And this workshop will be held on 23 to 27 October 2023 in Serpong, Tangerang. Actually, there are 3 main subjects in the workshop, which are AI and the emergent digital economy. And the second one is human-environment relations in the city. And the last one is post-colonial urban heritage and language politics. And for our workshop today, as one of the sub-themes in our workshop is post-colonial urban heritage and language politics, our webinar today will explore more about the urban heritage in the city. And this issue is very interesting to see on how the relationship between the heritage and urban issue are complex, but also essentials too. Okay, then without any longer, we will learn more from our speakers, Bapak Alkis Lukman, about his research. And our first speaker, Bapak Alkis Lukman, Master of Art, he is an archaeologist at the Research Center for Environmental Archaeology, Maritime Archaeology and Cultural Sustainability, BRIN. He holds his master's degree in archaeology with specialization in heritage management in world context from Leiden University. And his research interests revolve around heritage management and encompassing areas such as heritage impact assessment, community-based management, and also digital heritage. And for today's webinar, he will share his research about the cultural heritage digitization in Indonesia with case study in Depok. Hopefully, we will have fruitful discussion. For Bapak Alkis, please, screen is yours. Thank you, Pak.
Okay, thank you, Bu Nisa. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry if there is a problem with my connection. Please tell me. So I would like to share my screen first. Okay. Kelihatan ya? Sudah terlihat?
Sudah, Pak.
Oh ya. Okay. Thank you, Bu Nisa. Okay. Today, maybe I just want to share my topics and my experience when involving research in BRIN, as well as before in the National Archaeology Research Center. Today I would like to talk about the dilemma of urban heritage in Indonesia between preservation, modernization, and for whom. Okay, as a Gen Z researcher, I would like to incorporate an AI now. So I would share my conversation with ChatGPT. Here first, I asked them about what is urban heritage. In this sentence, I would like to emphasize that urban heritage is important for identity and character, and it will come to my first section about the historical narrative itself in urban heritage. First, I would like to, because my research mostly in the colonial period in archaeology, so I would like to talk about the decolonization of historical narration in the urban heritage in Indonesia. So in Indonesia itself, colonial monuments during the Independence Day represent a symbol of colonial memory that would like to eradicate while Indonesian is in a new country and with diverse people. So the Sukarno demolished the former King Square and replaced it by National Monument and 5 worship buildings around it to create a new image that representing the diversity of Indonesia that very rich in ethnicity, religion, and culture. So in this current situation, I would like to talk about the Depok. Depok is one of the colonial city previously in the 17th century. This is my research about Depok that in the historical record is before becoming a modern city today is on a plantation area that owned by a high-rise POC that called Coronelis Castellin. Cornelis Castellan argued that colonial areas would not survive without the support of the local community. So he taught his slaves of Christianity and freeing them from illiteracy. But at the end of his life, Cornelis Castellan liberated his slaves and gave his land at Depok to them. So as you can see, this is the descendants of Castellan slave, that how they clothes, how they posture, and their yeah, as you can see in this photographer, that the descendants of Castellan slave is start to integrate to Dutch society. So in 1850, the Raad van Indië officially announced the Depok's lands was the property of a former Cornelis Castellan slave. Then in 1871, the Raad Administrasi Board administration was assisted by legal expert that form kind of autonomous government in Depok that which conducted by the descendants of Castellan slave. So as you can see, but after the independence of Indonesia on 7 October 1945, around 40,000 people are attacked the old Depok area. Then many people were slaughtered on that day. Then, but until today, is still unknown who held this kind of dark history of Depok city. Then, the Depok city itself is nationalized and become part of Republic Indonesia in 1952. Okay, for most, how you can see as the legacy of the Cornelis Castellan and his descendants of his slave is first is religion, which is a Protestant community in Depok, and also the environment, the reservation area in or Cagar Alam in Depok it's the legacy of the Cornelis Castellan. So the Cornelis Castellan itself not only take attention to the people of the slave itself, but also the environment of area in Depok, because due to his era, Jakarta was the natural disaster like drought and what is else, because okay, banjir, I don't know what is in English, I forgot it, but banjir is a common disaster in Jakarta while Cornelis Castellan is alive, so because of the expansive sugar plantation in periphery area of Batavia. So he started to create that if they want to live and survive in Batavia, they have to preserve their environment and also engage the empowering the local people, so they do not create a fighting spirit. They start to integrate to the Batavia people. So with the good connection between the locals and the Netherlands, will create a new sustainable future for Batavia at that time. So its legacy, it's also we can see in the modern area. But a study from Yayasan Lembaga Cornelis Castellin or Cornelis Castellin Foundation that created by the descendants of Castellin slave state that almost 70% of historical building has been demolished for new residence and other commercial building purpose. As you can see at the Landhuis of Pondok Cina currently become part of Margo City. It's already removed its original facade, and then only this, I don't know, terrace that can be seen today. And also the other cases is the Landhuis of Cimanggis that in 2017, the central government planned to demolish this house for the construction of the Indonesian International Islamic University in and the interesting part is statement from Yusuf Kala at the that at that time is the vice president of Indonesia state in the newspaper that this house is owned by Arab invader. It is the time to move on, and we want to make is Indonesian future history. So as you can see that the colonial history or colonial heritage in the Depok itself is I don't know, maybe it's not that kind of priority for the government to preserve it during the modern period because the pressure of the modernization and development is more important rather than preserving the colonial heritage in Depok. But in contrast, in the future, of the Depok and the Depok itself, that many business people that one of the restaurants in Depok decorated its interior with murals based on the period at the Cornelis Castellin time, that it's also aroused visitor interest in the history of Cornelis Castellin and the Depok itself. That also when we conduct interview to the visitors, that they say that the fact that Cornelis Castellin was a colonial figure didn't seem to disrupt the visitors. And one of the visitors said that as a great nation, we must to pay respect to and pay attention to its history. But yeah, so this is the case of the Depok. The people tends to wants to eradicate the colonial memory, but in contrast, currently many area in Indonesia start to competing the recognition of colonial heritage as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, such as Semarang, the Old Town of Jakarta, and the historic marine landscape in Banda Islands. As you can see in here, that heritage itself always changing their value and their perspective to the people who live around it. And also it's consequently its effect, the impact of this perception create a new paradigm for the preservation. So maybe this is kind of like a reflection that we can see from these facts, that what kind of narration, historical narration for the city, for the urban heritage that would like to create, because like at the one area, the colonial heritage is try to eradicate, but in another part of Indonesia try to preserve the legacy of colonial period at their town. So it come to my second conversation with ChatGPT. What is the challenge in managing an urban heritage? Yeah, one thing for sure is how to become a balancing between the development and preservation. Well, yeah, I have several case study regarding this matter, and I would like to talk about the pressure of development and changing landscape in urban heritage. So the first one is SS Aquila, the icon of Ambon. This is that I conduct research about this in Ambon. I would like to create a significant assessment about the SS Aquila. SS Aquila itself is a Italian cargo ship that was bombed in 1958 that was bombed in 1958 by the CIA, because like it's a prompt war during the prompt war and proxying war at that time, because the Indonesian government at the time more close to the Russians rather than the USA. So the SS Aquila is one of the collateral damage of that war. And the ship itself, it's around 134 meters at the length, and the height itself is about 17 meters. But currently is lay at the wreck at the Ambon Bay, and it's nearby the area of the people of Ambon and can access through it. So currently, this is the situation of SS Aquila. Yeah, as you can see, this is a home of 1,000 fishes and reefs. As you can see, this is the part of the chimney of the ship. This is the at the back of the ships. That this is the shallowest part of the shipwreck. It's around 12 meters when we conduct and we survey the ship, and it's also the rudder. But as you can see, this also it's full with the coral and reefs and soft coral also in covering all of the ships. And you can see this is like many pieces are making the ship is as their home. This is like a puffer box fish, and this is a snail, and this is one of the, I don't know, rare fish. This is the psychedelic frogfish that's only found only in the Ambon Bay. So you cannot find this type of fish in the other part area in Indonesia.
Bahasanya
Halo?
bahasa
Oh,
Inggris.
sorry. Halo? Gimana? Mohon maaf, tadi ada terdengar masuk. Oh ya, saya bisa lanjut ya. Oke. Now SS Aquila is one of the best wreck dive spot in Indonesia. So many people from local and international divers take an attention of the SS Aquila as one of the best wreck dive spot in Indonesia. But currently it's threatened by the city of development, because as you can see here, the SS Aquila wreck is really close to the Pertamina port area. Yeah, because it's this Pertamina depot, and currently this Pertamina port is becoming a hub for Eastern Indonesian region. So in April 2023, the Transportation of Navigation Authorities in Ambon issued an order for the removal of the SS Aquila wreck, which was feared to be obstructing the safety navigation route of the new jetty in Pertamina Wayami port. This is a new port built in 2022, and this is, as you can see, the circle here is about the radius ship maneuver when they want to try to docking to this port. So SS Aquila is become an obstacle of this kind of operation of Pertamina port. So in this situation, this is my research now. We would like to create an assessment. What is better, if SS Aquila still preserved in situ at that site, or we have to move it to other area, or we just preserve it by documenting itself. So we just trying to create a significant assessment. So we mapping all of the seabed area, the environment, the fish, and also the condition of the wreck itself. So this is kind of dilemmatic when the SS Aquila itself is icon of Ambon that you cannot see at the other part area in Indonesia, when the wreck at that big is lay on your home yard. So this is kind of, this is still ongoing research. So maybe I don't know what is the continue of this wreck in the future, but today's situation, this is what happened, and I hope it can be still preserved in situ. So the second cases is Borobudur Temple compound. Yeah, it's as you can see that Borobudur itself is inscribed in World Heritage List in 1991, and but the attributes of the vertical cultural landscape, it's not only the temple itself, but also the environment in the surrounding area, including the rural, the traditional, and agricultural in periphery area. But yeah, as you can see, because the magnificent and the history and the spiritual value of Borobudur, many people comes as tourists, as a pilgrim to visit Borobudur. And also the governments would like to try create Borobudur temple as one of New Bali to attract more visitors to come to Borobudur. But meanwhile, yeah, when it's inscribed as World Heritage UNESCO, they said that it's part the environment of agriculture now is changing to the tourist attractions, which is kind of like hotels, restaurants, homestay, and many other facilities to assist and support the tourist industry. So this is one of the symbols that created change from rural to urban landscape, the mixed way. Yes, you can see here. And UNESCO also concerned with the development in Borobudur, that it's extensive tourist development, changing the landscape and area of Borobudur itself. And they try to, I don't know, to prevent the government to push more the development in the area. So as you can see, based on these two cases, the heritage itself can be seen as a burden or obstacle for the development, or is a fatal foundation that changing the landscape from rural to urban landscape. So the third part is, how about the people? One of the issues that arise by ChatGPT is language endangerment in multilingual language in Indonesia, because when language is potentially lost and in danger, so it will be also change the social and cultural value in Indonesia. Maybe many probable cause about this, like dominance of Bahasa Indonesia, and then brainwash of television and social media, and also educational policy that not many schools today doesn't really have a curriculum for embrace and preserve the local language. And also the social economic factor, while the economic opportunities and better education tends to create people to talk and in daily conversation in Bahasa Indonesia. And also intermarriage, when between, I'm a victim of intermarriage as well. I cannot speak. My father is from Java, my mother is from Sunda, but they never talk in their local language, so I cannot speak both of those language. So mainly in my daily activities, they just talk in Indonesian. So it create new paradigm that will be led to the loss of the multilingual language in Indonesia, the traditional language in Indonesia, and also the social and cultural stigma about the language itself. I don't know if it's true or not, because I'm never checking the fact correctly, but my friends is come from Banyumas, which is its Javanese is quite unique. Ngapak Jawa Ngapak. He tends to shy to talk in its language because its dialect, its pronouns, it's different from other Javanese dialect, traditional Javanese. But yeah, maybe it will become yeah, in several parts in Indonesia, that social and cultural stigma makes people to shy and they don't want to talk in their local language. So maybe this is one of the cases that we will like to address in this BRIN-LDE workshop, that language endangerment in multilingual Indonesia, it's already start to leading to the monolithic of only Bahasa Indonesia. So the next question is, what do we do? What do we do? We have to, as a researcher, to prevent or just to watch the changings and the development and the modernizations happen occurs and other in many parts in Indonesia. So the question is, as a researcher, what can we do about it? And maybe from my sharings can sparking new ideas or innovative steps to create a better future for all of us. Yeah, maybe that's what I can share here today in this presentation. My apologize if there is any mistakes, and we can discuss it later. So Bu Nisa, I will give this time and speaks to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak, for the presentation. It's very interesting presentation about the dilemma of urban heritage in Indonesia between preservation and modernization. You also mentioned that almost 70% of historical building index demolished because of the urban development. And this condition, I guess, is not only in Depok, but also in cities in Indonesia. Right? And then urban heritage attributes needs to be identified and be given special consideration, and through the increasing concern about the heritage situation in urban context would be developed. And next is our question and our job to how to make this urban heritage become sustainable. And next, before we jump into our second speaker, I just want to inform you to prepare your question or comments for our speakers today. Since Leiden University Indonesia will have 3 books to give for 3 participants who have best question to our speakers. You can use the raise a hand button or just drop the question in the chat box. But is Professor Carola is already joined or not yet? Okay then. Let me try to give some several questions from participant who has give. The one is from Argo Twikromo from UIGA, Faculty of Social Science and Political Science. How can we use the values of cultural heritage to manage living condition in the contemporary societies?
Sorry, I cannot hear you clearly. Can you repeat the questions?
It's from Pak Argo Twikromo. He asked about how can we use the values of cultural heritage to manage living condition in the contemporary societies.
Okay. How actually how the heritage itself, because as you can see in my presentation, the values is always changing because like the political issue or an economical situation. So currently, like how to create heritage that will give benefits to the people or to ourselves in terms of either economic, either social or cultural bargaining power. So I would say that many people, sorry. Oh yeah, I would say that yeah, in this area, many people maybe friends from our research groups already conduct research about the young people in Jogja and Solo create the souvenirs, handicrafts from their I don't know, relief, and also the traditional value in I don't know, the lukisan in the paintings, and also yeah, it can be many ways use the local value and indigenous value about the past that created a form of new form sort of package tourisms or yeah, social and entrepreneurships. Maybe that's my if I'm not wrong, it's equation.
Okay. And then next one is from BRIN-LDE. He asked about some historic cities are abandoned and forgotten. What should we do? And then
Abandoned.
yeah, some historic cities are abandoned and forgotten. So what can we do to preserve these historic cities?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Honestly, I don't really have a clear answer about it because it will always subjective when we say that's abandoned. We say that it's not preserved well because yeah, as you can see in the SS Aquila itself, it's important for the local community to make their livelihoods there as a dive guide or for the fisheries. But at the one part that if it still continue to happen there, the port itself will be an obstacle for the operation of the port. So we will have to need to itself between if the better place to take is to preserve in situ, and also if we cannot to preserve in situ, how we could bring it to future generations, such as with digital currently digital documentation, 3D scanner, augmented reality, many parts that could be helped and we can conduct and to preserve it to future generation. But also if it's a historical city and abandoned city itself, it's not part of the collective memory of the majority of the people itself. So we have to introduce about it. So in archaeology, we start to conduct research, to excavate, to survey, to create ethnographical studies from the peoples that will create a new narration or a new reinterpretation about the historical past. Yeah, maybe that's my answer.
Yeah, thank you, Palkis. And I see now Professor Carola Hein already joined with us today. And good morning, Prof. Carola. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Okay, today Prof. Carola will present about the water ports and historic cities. And Professor Carola is the initiator of the LDE Leiden Delft Erasmus Port City Future Program. And she also the UNESCO chair for water ports and historic cities. Without any longer, Professor Carola Hein, please, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Maybe one quick question up front. How long would you like me to talk? Because that, and then how much time should we leave for discussion? So just that this.
Yeah, maybe 20 minutes.
Okay, great. But please feel free also to jump in if there are any spontaneous reactions or questions. So what I would like to do today is to talk about the role of water, and water is key to Indonesian history, present and future. So what we've been working on is to look at the question of how to value water, culture, and heritage for sustainable development. Because we all, or many of us, and I just heard it also, heard you talk about it in the last intervention, we all think that the past matters. My students think that the past matters, but how exactly can we value the past? What can we do with it, and how? And how can we activate it to make our future developments more sustainable? And so that's what we are looking into. And I do think that is a very important and valid question, because, and this is a project my students recently did in a project called Urban Archipelago. So we asked them what happens if the waters are rising, the ground level water is changing. For example, in a city like Trieste, where you have this beautiful square that is open to the sea, and any change in water will affect directly the living on the ground. So the students presented a project, well, how can we live with water if water is at the first floor level? And I think those questions are very much relevant in all of the big coastal cities or port city territories around the world. I mean, whether we look at New York with changing lines, we will easily see how water will take over many of the spaces we are used to. And the question is, well, how do we react to it? There are lots of projects, including for Indonesia out there, saying, let's build new islands on the sea to block off sea level rise, or to build new dikes crossing the entire North Sea. So most recently, scholars, particularly in the Netherlands, and policymakers have come up with more nature-based solutions. So rather than trying to resist water, trying to live with water. And that includes giving back room to the rivers. That's what the name of this project is, Room for the River, by finding new places for water to expand during floods. And remember that in many traditional cultures, we have lived with floods. We've even welcomed floods, rather than trying to push water through from the source to the sea as quickly as possible. So when we take a new approach to water, we also are looking to heritage, and we understand that water has served the societies for long times. And I would argue that we have to get back to a kind of water systems approach, where we not only think about water as something that has to be channeled through, that we have to get rid of, but really reinvent many of the areas. I was trying to look at the chat at the same time, but I'll let you do that afterwards. So that we find out in what kind of modern ways can we look at water systems. So integrating the technical, the flows, the pipelines with the societal, with the institutions and the cultures that are related to it. So that if we want to do, so we could use the past, among others, in a way in which we say, these are the kinds of experiences we can take away from the past. So understanding that water systems used to exist, integrating everything from technology to institutions and cultures, and that this kind of living should be something we're also striving for in the future. So that would be one concrete takeaway. And you might want to mute one person there. So that might be one concrete takeaway point of the past. Another concrete takeaway point of the past could be to say, what do we want to, well, what do we have to deal with? Because what I was showing you before, these beautiful waterscapes have often become industrial landscapes, And these may not be the things we want to learn, or we can also learn from negative examples, but these may not be the places we want to protect. So how do we deal with all these different elements of the past? One is learning from the past, one is sometimes trying to overcome the past, and another may be to actually live with the past or to protect it. And this means that we have to look at water in all its dimensions and layers. So water is not only a line on the ground, it's really a porous area where we have groundwater as much as rain. So we need to look at water from a, not only from a horizontal, but also from a vertical perspective. So with that in mind, we have done a couple of activities and publications. One book is called Adaptive Strategies for Water Heritage. And that book tried to look at water through different types of, or bring together the different types of water, thinking of drinking water, agricultural water, etc. And to look into what are the spaces that we have, and how could heritage interventions or water management interventions be connected to heritage interventions. So when we look at drinking water here in Europe, we might think of the aqueducts like this one. So the question is, how do we use, reuse, preserve, learn from the kind of Roman aqueduct here in France that in this case crosses a river and delivered drinking water to major cities? How can we learn from the drinking wells in India, the step wells, for example, also for the need to connect to community type of living? Or when we think about agricultural water, many of the sites that used to be there, for example, water meadows here in the painting, look just like a nice landscape, but there are actually a lot of traditional techniques that were embedded in these settings. And you all know how important and intricate it is living with paddy fields, with rice fields. And this goes also into questions of land reclamation and even the stories that we tell. So we can think of the Netherlands and the polders, and we can praise the windmills to say they have helped to lift water out of the land and make land livable. On the other hand, we also need to think about the lifestyles and the living conditions that were then involved there. I mean, the people, the entire families were living in these mills, and they had to be present for all of the day, because otherwise somebody had to be there to take care of the wind. Which means that often the stories we tell, so this is a polder in Japan, where the local museum tells the story of the land reclamation in the site, but it does not really speak to the history of the fishing community that used to use this brackish water. So also to be able to say, which stories do we tell about the past, and which ones do we want to deliver for the future? So and when we look at the past, we have to always be aware that as historians, we tell only select stories. And when we create heritage, these select stories are also the ones that are then kind of enshrined for the larger population. Water is also, and I think it's often separated from it, part of river and coastal planning. So how do we deal with heritage sites on a river? And again, rivers are generally under-researched. I think there's way more research on coastal planning than there is on rivers. So how do we deal with the various ways in which we have treated rivers in the past in order to design the future? So I'm just giving you some insights on this book that we've been dealing with, which also included World Heritage sites like Hamburg, the warehouse district, and the port city. So the point here is that when we have long been praising, for example, architectural artifacts, we often have forgotten about water, and water is a connector. So the water that we see, for example, here in the warehouse district, UNESCO World Heritage Site, is the same as in the port a couple of kilometers over. So however we treat the water here or in the port will have an effect one on the other. And many of these questions are ones that are very complex and long-term. So one example here on energy, this is a wool mill in the Netherlands, which used water to generate energy for wool making. This water was flowing into the polder, but it took 6 windmills to take the water back out of the polder. So the private user who used the energy into the flow into the polder benefited from it, but it took public funding to actually get the water back out of the polder. And it took them 300 years to solve this problem on who owns water, who uses water in what ways. So all of these are questions that we need to look at when we look at the relationship between water in space and culture in institutions. And water institutions have a long history, water tribunals, for example. And again, this is something that I think in Indonesia you can very well relate to, or questions of rituals. So those rituals are things we have seen in many countries, or even more recently, when I was in Japan, there was a ceremony to reopen a creek that had been redesigned for contemporary purposes. So what we've been trying to do is recreate attention for water in the context and with heritage, with the idea to use the historic urban landscape approach of UNESCO as a way to bring a system-based approach to heritage. So to say, let's not only look at a building, but let's understand the building in its larger context. And one of these larger contexts is definitely definitely water, because water is never fixed. It flows, it connects into a broader system. And water as a sector is very much in need of new ideas and new developments. So
Is it Professor Caroline's Reese or only me? Is it from Professor Carola, right? Okay, just waiting for Professor Carola to sign in again. Iya, sepertinya Prof. Carola terlempar.
Dilanjut dengan Q&A dulu aja, Mbak Khoi.
Dapat
apologies,
informasi.
my computer just restarted. I have no idea why.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but I think it was a good moment to so I can pick it up right there. So what I was going to say, what we've been trying to do now is to find ways how to best connect water heritage and sustainable development. And with that in mind, also to prepare, for example, for the Writing Academy and the work we want to do in Indonesia with all of you. So oh dear, I hope my computer doesn't break down again. There's something wrong here. Let's give me a second. I'm just gonna close another window. Okay, I think I'm back. So what we've been trying to work on now is to try and find and build these links. And in order to build these links between the water and the heritage sector, we've established a number of new publications. So again, I just stopped on this idea of the historic urban landscape. And the historic urban landscape approach from UNESCO, how can we connect that, for example, to the Valuing Water Initiative? And this Valuing Water Initiative, so that's a water-based practice, is in my experience often not aware. It's eager to involve the past and heritage, but I don't think, or I think we're still looking for the right way as to how actually to do it. And one way we've been, or some of the ways we've been working on now as to how to do it include, so we were at the United Nations in March to present a number of events around water, culture, and heritage, and connected to the United Nations of Rivers. And in that context, we have done, we have also launched, and I'm still trying to launch also my, there we go. We have launched a new open access journal, peer-reviewed, which tries to do a number of things. So raise awareness for water, culture, heritage, and sustainable development, but also provide a platform for publications that are relevant to both academics and professionals. So academics have this requirement that we need to publish peer-reviewed, that we need to publish open access, that there's a certain quality associated to it. But when we publish as academics our 8,000 to 10,000 word articles, well, the chances nobody reads them. So what I'm trying to do with this journal is to make the articles short, 1,500 to 2,000 words, with a lot of illustrations, so that they are also attractive for professionals, easy to read. And on the other hand, help professionals publish short pieces that can be of relevance to academics. So we have so far published 3 issues. The 4th one is forthcoming. And the idea is to raise awareness about the relation between water and culture around the kind of frameworks of nature and energy, to say that we need to put culture back into the lead, to have values and culture drive the ways in which we employ technology, in which we develop cities, in which we develop infrastructure, or even deal with questions, hunger and education, so that the sustainable development goals, or sustainable development has always been one of our interests. They come from the past, they lead in the future, they will be going even beyond 2030, but how can we then link our knowledge of the past to that of the present and into the future? So with these ideas in mind, we are trying to bring together different types of water thinking. And what I mean with that is also to say, well, what kind of water are we actually talking about? Are we talking about drinking, bathing, washing? Are we talking about water management, shipping, migration? All of these are water-related practices. So let's be specific about which type of water we are talking about, but let's also be specific whether we're talking about history, heritage, heritage sites that we really want to preserve. And at that point, if we put it together, maybe then we can see if water-related, water management-related heritage, so the dikes and the dams, how could we use that kind of analysis to talk to water landscape history, to talk about water learning, or even to look at the ways in which we deal with rivers and other places. So in that journal, we have now brought together, so the last one was a preface by Henk Oving. Here are the 2 first covers of the ones that are out. So you can check them out online. And I can just briefly show you a few of the articles that are in there. So they are either coming from people from the water sector or from the heritage sector, from architecture and planning. So here is an article on agriculture in the floating gardens of the Aztecs, for example, which tries to show how we can analyze historic practices and then use them to design future floating cities or floating spaces. Or a colleague who looked at law and heritage in Indonesia, looking at the ways in which traditional traditional community-based practices were integrated, whereas when we see water only as a something to facilitate, say, economy or tourism, we lose the sustainable qualities of what we had in the past. There are pieces on religious heritage and water management, for example, or there are stories, and I've been quite surprised on everything we've learned so far, on underwater cultural heritage, for example, the way in which we used to catch, say, fish through stone weirs, and the fact that climate change, sea level rise, the temperatures are affecting both are really visible in this type of fishing activities. There are also initiatives here from a group of Polish women who are mourning the pollution of the river. So it's a really diverse sweep of articles, but the idea is to provide a platform for all of these different kinds of thinking about water and try to connect the water with the heritage sector. And you can look this up online. So here's, for example, this idea also about creating new methods on visualizing water, which is a colleague from Delft who is trying to bring together in a single format, how do we showcase water, how do we present it? So this has also led us to make open online courses like this MOOC called Water Works, or more recently a professional education course that will launch in September on the related topic. We've also are looking for new ways of educating people, for example, through a serious game here called Water Works, which aims to give people this knowledge on how to think about water as a system in the long term with multiple stakeholders, as both based in nature and culture, and then understand how can we use that and activate that knowledge for the future. So I will stop here, and open it up for questions. So then I hope I've given you an idea of how important water is, how difficult it is sometimes to connect it to the past, to history and heritage, but that it's much needed to design the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Carola, for your presentation. It's very interesting presentation about how to value water, culture, and heritage for sustainable development. I am interested with the port city, since as the archipelago country, Indonesia has many cities that headed to coastal areas, and nature-based solution and how to live together with water by integrating the technical things and learning from the past for future protection and their cultural values. It's become key of the sustainable urban heritage. And then, yeah, thank you very much. And there are several questions that have been waiting. I will start to read the question from chat box.
Yes, I'm just reading the one from Stanley Lutia Liap, and if I summarize it, but maybe you're on the call and you want to present it yourself. And what I read, I think everybody can read it. One of the question is whether, so I summarize it, should we address the communities, educating the community, or does it need an iron fist from a leader to protect the water for future generations? Well, this is a very tough question, I would say. And then I would add, is this the same answer that we need to give in all areas of the world? Yes, I mean, this is really open for questions. So I'll read it out. Do we have to wait like COVID-19 to force people to care about health? Previously, normal people responded to flu differently when COVID-19 occurred. People who previously did not understand technology were forced by circumstance to work remotely, and now we are using Zoom. Maybe my answer would be, we need system thinking, or we need system design. So we cannot, one single person cannot change it. I mean, it's great if people live more sustainable, and I really admire them for it. I'm trying to do my best. But sustainability, circularity will only work if it is at a larger scale, if different systems coincide. Now, currently we have systems that make us create waste, and where people are compensated and benefit from waste that is not circulated. And that happens both at the local level. We are always asked to throw things away in order to buy new things. So it's really an economic cycle that drives this waste creation. Same thing for global flows. So in some ways, we need local communities where we have both, where we not only have negative externalities, but also positive externalities, where people benefit from global transport, for example. Polluting the seas just because we can, because there's no laws, doesn't help. So in that sense, the the colleagues who wrote about Indonesian laws and the importance of community as a comprehensive water system is different from exploitation of water systems for single purposes. I think that's probably the way to go. But I'm a Democrat at heart, so I'm not going to say we need a dictator to get rid of us and preserve it for future generations. But maybe you want to intervene. Stanley? Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
But it's a very good question, and I think we can debate it for hours, but this would be perfect for a writing academy. So please do send something into our blue papers or send me an email. Yes, and Sweta already put the link to the blue papers in there. Shall I read the next one, or do you want to do it? How can population fight their rights towards water when sometimes the government allowed certain companies to open their business for drinking water? And then after certain years, the water was drought, the area was drought, so population cannot get water anymore. What an irony. So what are the suggestions towards the situations? The published papers or books are not reached or read or implemented. That's exactly why we also made the blue papers, to have something that is out there online, short, crisp, that you can take away with policy recommendations. Because you're completely right. If we give just the companies the right to water, and we give away water for single purposes, the community doesn't benefit. We can no longer focus only on economy or technology. So whatever way we can do to bring back this multi-layered system approach, we need to connect space, society, culture. We need to have rituals again. We need to celebrate. We have to have institutions that preserve that entire balance. So yes, it's a question of governance. It's a question of politics. It's a question of voting. But it starts, I think, with awareness. The more people know that we have to have this kind of system thinking, the more chances we have that they vote, at least in the countries where we are, like in the Netherlands, where we are voting, for that we can be actively engaged in putting water first on our agenda. I think maybe that's my answer there. Perhaps you want to, it's Mary Tembaria, if you want to react to that. And then I don't see any reaction. Farhan wrote, a few weeks ago, I looked up city planning maps of Surabaya and Malang, specifically in the Tunjungkan area, Surabaya and Kayuntangan area in Malang. Those two areas are rich in heritage site. What I found is that Surabaya didn't have an area that was marked as an heritage area, even for the Tunjungan area. This is different from Malang. They had an area that was marked as heritage area. My question is city planning enough to preserve heritage sites, or are there alternative ways to preserve heritage sites? Yes, exactly. So one of the challenges with heritage is if we try to preserve heritage just because it's heritage, well, we have agreed to do that, fine, but we need to embed it in larger community development, sustainable developments, local practices. That's exactly what the historic urban landscape approach tries to do. And ideally, these heritage sites are lived sites. They are sites that have meaning for locals. They are sites that create work for locals, because if we only try to rely on tourists, well, we saw what COVID brought us, then entire areas are going to decay. So we have to give meaning back, understand these sites, activate them. I'm going to give you one example that fascinates me in the Netherlands. They have, there's a military defense line of 80 kilometers, hundreds of years old, which was meant to allow the country to have a water, to put in water so that the foreign army cannot enter. Now, how do you preserve such a site? Only by matching water management interests, hydrological interests with the heritage structure, then it became possible to preserve the heritage structure. So those kinds of creative solutions, and yes, they are urban planning, they can also be landscape design, they can maybe also come from creative practice. So this, one of the articles that I showed you was about creating a new ritual where these Polish women were actually commemorating the pollution of a river and the death of a river due to mining. So the groundwater had been taken out to facilitate mining. The water came back up and was polluted. So the river is polluted, and they created a ritual to commemorate, to really show their worries about this kind of pollution. There's a question in or Ari Nulia, I think that's in Indonesian, so I cannot read that.
For Ari is to fill in the presents. And maybe I have still have a question from the email. It's from name is from Yuliana Kamanjaya. She asks about what are some concrete examples in Leiden or in Delft that archaeological discoveries have opened up the new insight about the use of space or the function of fields in the past, and how this information is used in contemporary architectural practice.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was giving the example of this military defense line, for example, but I think your question is the other way around. So where did we find archaeological evidence or archaeological practices that can help the future? That's a more difficult one. I have to think about whether I have a concrete example for that. And then again, in what way is the inspiration there? So what I've been trying to say is there are right now 3 ways. So the past as a mirror, so reading the past, understanding how we worked in the past, and then use a system thinking for the future. The way that things limit us or that determine us because we've built so much, just as Winston Churchill says, first we build our cities, thereafter they shape us, something along these lines. And you could say first we set up our water systems, and thereafter they shape us. And then there's heritage which we have decided to protect and for which we have to find good ways to do so. I'm still thinking about archaeological evidence, and I'm wondering if we can think, so one thing we are doing, but it might not be the answer to your question. In Amsterdam, for example, has a big project on bridges and quay walls, because many of these bridges and quay walls need repair. But a lot of these things have been built 1,000 years back, and we do not necessarily know what's in the underground. So what kind of foundations, materials, stones have been used in the past. So what we are trying to do is also look in the archives, because many of the things may be lost. So we might have old pipes in the ground. So either you have to dig them up, or you can dig in the archives to try and find information on what's out there, so that you don't have to open up the ground. And why does it matter to know whether there are pipes in the ground? If you want to do modern construction, you need to have awareness of the foundations. So maybe all of these are not the answers to your question, but maybe you can speak up and then we can continue to think, or maybe you have something in mind that you would like to know more about.
Yeah, I don't think so. Miss Juliana is here. Yeah, maybe we just jump up to the question. He's not in here. And then the second question is, what is the impact of the modern urbanization on the water resource and historical canal system in Leiden? And how can contemporary architectural approach maintain the sustainability of water?
Yeah, so if I understood you correctly, what's the impact of industrialization? Well, there's multiple impacts that you can think of. As soon as you have more people, you need more and different water systems. You need to provide more drinking water, more sewage. You have to provide more land, which often means you have to get more polders. You have more pollution. If you have industrial waste going through your rivers, if you have more houses, you also have more pressure on the land. So you have in cities like Gouda, for example, where land has been claimed, there's a lot of problems of sinkage of areas. Now I think you have the same in Jakarta, that entire areas are, that not only water is rising, but that the land is sinking, which makes the problem even worse. So once you've pumped out the water. So it's a very complex effect of urbanization, industrialization on water systems. And what was the second? So that is true for the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is also a very densely populated country. So that's part of the problem. And the other problem that I mentioned in the beginning is that the Netherlands are both threatened by rivers. So we are located in a delta. So there are rivers coming from Germany and other countries. So there's a risk of flood, and there is the risk from the North Sea. So the country is really at a very tight balance between different water movements. So when you ask what's done about it, so there's a whole history about water management. So in the Netherlands, for example, how to get rid of water and pump it towards the sea is also a story of different provinces, of entire systems of dikes and dams and polders, of financial control. Even the city of Amsterdam will control how the provinces behind it can get rid of water, or the construction of ports is interesting in that context, because for example, small ports like the port of Scheveningen, which might be interesting also in the context of Surabaya to compare to. I'm not quite sure of the size of Surabaya, but we have here small ports like Scheveningen, or the big port like Rotterdam. So to look both at aspects of historic ports and contemporary ports, but ports are also places of water discharge. So when you have a port like Rotterdam, the layer of the land is actually the highest. It's higher than the city, so you're probably safer in the port than in the city. But the question remains, do we want to bring ships into the country beyond the flood defenses? So when you look at the Netherlands from the air, you see these huge gates. They are there to, if there's a flood, to close off the port, but we need to open them because we still want to bring the ships into the country. So this is it's a real ballet between how much do we want shipping to come into the country, shipping being another example of industrialization, globalization, urbanization, and how much can we do outside the country. So then we get into questions like deep sea ports, and I don't know exactly, you would know how this works in Indonesia, how deep the sea is in front of the ports and how much shipping we can actually bring into the city. So it might be interesting to look at the maritime routes around Indonesia, both from a traditional perspective, coastal shipping, now more global shipping, and the heritage sites led behind between it. So maybe I've been meandering around the question, but I hope it there's something in it.
Maybe Pak Alkis, our other presenter, to give some comments. Pak Alkis.
Hello, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silakan,
Sorry. Sorry, what's the question? I'm sorry. Hello.
In your opinion, what's the impact of the modern or how can the contemporary architectural approach of sustainable water?
Oh, sustainable water. Oh. I'm not really sure I have case in Indonesia, but I know that in the Apsara, Cambodia, try to they reinvent the water system from the Angkor in the Siem Reap area for rehabilitate and reinforce their area from the flooding. But in Indonesia, I think I don't have any examples for the modernization, for the how the archaeological evidence can be used for the I don't know, water system in modern society. But I have a question for Carola. Is it possible to do that? Yeah, I have a question
Yes.
regarding the water system in the Netherlands, since the Netherlands itself is below on the water level. Yes, you still in the Netherlands still preserve the city conditions. And what do you think about most canal currently is do we have to preserve the canal system from the early 17th or 18th periods to preserve it, or just using the modern system so there is no benefit or point plus for the from the historical or cultural perspective. So what do you think about the canal systems in the Netherlands is already we rarely to see again?
I mean, that's a very good question. When you could say, let's give up the Western Netherlands and all move to the East. So I think this is really this balance between, do we think we can resist water, which has been the tradition of the Netherlands all the time? That's where these projects come from. Let's build a wall across the North Sea. Let's build higher dikes and dams. And so far, it has been possible. And the water engineers, that's what we're all going for. So I think, I don't know, the next 100 years, probably people are still, we need the canals otherwise, because they're drainage canals, right? So water needs to be drained from the ground and pumped away. So as long as this pumping system works, it works, whether it's, so there are areas that are maybe, I don't know exactly, but let's say 6, 7, 8 meters under sea level already. So maybe most of it is, my house is 2 meters under sea level, for example. And it works because there's a controlled water level. And sometimes it's also a problem of drought as much as it is of, so it's more a problem of fluctuation too. In the long term, how much money can be invested to keep this alive? But should there be selections of, say, World Heritage sites like Amsterdam that we want to preserve in any case? Or do we at some point have to say we only build today on land that is high enough? Or are we saying if we build, we should be building more dikes that in the future can be streets, and then everything else gets flooded? That's a discussion that we need to have. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with my architecture and design students, to open it up. So you often get from the students proposals, yes, okay, let's flood everything, let's keep a few hotspots as heritage. But that's definitely not yet the discussion that the government, for example, will have. But that's why I'm using architecture and design students to say, you guys are still free to make proposals and let's see what happens. Not sure if it's an answer, but it's the same thing like the port. Rotterdam port is the biggest in Europe and it's a global player. Do we want to keep a port in these conditions? And how can we do it? How much are we willing to invest? And what would be the future of the Netherlands if we didn't do it? So if we all move to Germany, is that the solution? So that's.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, next is from the chat box is from Mbak Zweta. It's quite long.
Maybe Sweta, you can
This
also
may
come
not
on.
fully be a question. Sorry. So this is not a fully question, but comments
Yes.
from Mbak Zweta.
And I think this is a very good point. So the Brantas River is a really good case study. And I think, as far as I understand, there's also various colleagues from the Netherlands working on it. So this whole question of how the river from source to sea has changed through times, from the happy memories, as Sveta is writing right now, to now mostly sad stories about pollution and floods. So this is why we are saying we need a systems approach. Say cities at the coastal areas that are at the bottom of the rivers are often very rich and have all the economic benefits. The people at the source don't necessarily have any benefit from keeping the river clean downstream. So we also have to rethink in a territorial approach. So we need to think not just a city on a river, but we need to think the whole system from source to sea. And we have to find ways to even compensate people that are, or find ways to that the people at the source take care of the river, that people in the middle of the river take care of it. And one part of doing this is also to think differently about our territories. So the OECD is now talking about city basins. We have argued but this is only about Europe. We've just published a Port City Atlas, which is also online, to say we need to think from the sea to the port, the city, and the territory. So this whole sea-land continuum needs to be considered as one, from a watershed, from the area of the entire watershed, the river, down to each of the communities. And then we need to think how each element can have both positive and negative interactions, or can have positive interactions with the river, so that the water we give from the source downstream to the communities is actually clean. And that was what our traditional communities were, I think, much more in line with. If you want to have a rice paddy, you have to give clean water down the stream to your neighbor. That's what institutions, laws, everything was set up for. So yes, I do think we need to come back to that kind of community-based thinking. And maybe it's about communities and not necessarily about local authorities, which may also have a different goal. Not sure, Sweta, if you want to come online and comment on it.
Rosetta, is there any comments that you want to add?
Hi, I'm sorry I can't turn on my camera right now. But yeah, I do agree with you, and it would make such a very interesting multidisciplinary studies, because you could learn from the anthropological sites and from the architecture, planning, of course, and archaeological disciplines, which would make it a very wholesome study.
Exactly.
Perhaps could be a topic. Yeah.
Yes, thanks for saying that, because that's also what we try to do with the Leiden-Delft Erasmus collaboration, so that we have the anthropologists, archaeologists, historians, say from Leiden, with all their area study knowledge, together with the architects, designers from Delft, and maybe more economists, but also communication people in Erasmus. So just as I think we need to bring these systems together across the different disciplines, from academics to professionals, and recreate awareness, facilitate the growth of community initiatives.
Okay. Prof. Carola, I get the information that you only available until 3 p.m. Is that right?
Yes, I can stay until 10, so we have a few more minutes, and then I need to go.
Okay, maybe this is a question for me, but I think my question is out of context, but I'm just curious about the Netherlands today. It will be, there is a cultural value that has been developed and shared to the community. But how about the now condition, at the present condition, about with the many migrants, how is the cultural value are shared to them?
I'm not sure that I got your question right. So the cultural value of water for migrants?
Yeah.
I think that's it's a very interesting and very big topic. So traditionally migrants would come via the sea, via the ports. There used to be migration districts, Chinatowns, whatever, in the coastal cities, which is one of the reasons why I think many of our coastal cities are so diverse. Now migrants no longer come through the ports, which means that also migrants often, for example, won't appreciate the value of water heritage, or even very basic things. I'm German, but when I came to the Netherlands, I was surprised how swimming schools for children were organized. So you have in the Netherlands, kids are taught how to dive under a boat, because the swim schools are much more about what happens if you fall into a canal, right? In Germany or in other countries in the US, it was about learning the different styles of swimming. So even these very small cultural attributes change from one country to the other. And I think we need to be aware of how these elements work. Sorry.
Yeah, because I also see about how maybe the different topic, but about the bicycle also, how they should learn that I know about the migrant should learn how to buy. And also the water is swimming also one of the part of culture.
Exactly. So that migrants from different, so that swimming, that's what I was trying to say. Swimming is a key element for everybody living here. So how do you bring migrants along for either appreciate the traditional heritage of the Dutch as a seafaring country, or how do you live with the watery environment here and appreciate it and keep it healthy? So that's why this whole community thinking is also so important, because I mean, what Sveta was also saying, in the past, if you grow up with water, if you grow up with rice paddies, you have a different water awareness. So how do we recreate this kind of water awareness in a time when the population is constantly changing? So then I do think from swimming schools to food to whatever, we have to really bring back water awareness for all the population in a country.
And okay, I think there is no question from chat box. There's no more question, or maybe any other comment from participants? Yeah.
But then I would really like to thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I would like to add notes about Mbak Zweta comments about the Brantas River. Mostly in the Indonesian area that has a river, when the main transportation changing from the rivers to the roads, and people become to create a land basis. And because like I have similar cases in Banjarmasin, when the rivers still become the main route for transportation, all of the house is the facade is towards the rivers, so they start they keep the cleaning the rivers itself, and they took attention the river system from the from the mountains through the sea. So I think because the changing perspective and the modes of transportation from the rivers to the lands, it's become people become neglected the how important the rivers. It's not only for transportation, but also how to create the better and sustainable cities from themselves. Because I think because the river is not for the main source of their daily activities, so they change the aspect of how they treat the rivers. Maybe that's my comments about it.
Okay, Prof. Carola, since Prof. Carola have limited time, and but I would like to ask, before you leave, could you please give some closing statement and choose one of the participant with the best question or comments to get a book from Leiden University Indonesia?
Well, thanks a lot. I do think we have a really important topic at hand, and I'm really glad to see all your engagement. We've only opened up a huge box of questions and themes and interventions. So if we could raise all of your interests to join the Writing Academy, to meet, to develop together. So please feel free to be in touch. But you are also asking me to point to one participant. So I would probably choose Stanley, who asked the first question, if I may, and Stanley is still, I think, maybe online, but I think, Keith, you also should intervene on that. So thank you very much again for a really lively and good discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Carola, and congratulations for Bapak Stanley. And please, Bapak Stanley, to stay with us for a moment. After this webinar, we will inform you how to receive the book. Okay, we still have 2 books to give for the best question or comments. Thank you very much, Professor Carola, for your time. And we hopefully we can meet you in the BRIN-LDE Academy in October.
Yes.
And we will continue. Our discussion is not end yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm leaving and I hope to see you again soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Carola.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah. We still have 2 books to give for the best question and comments. But since Professor Carola already leave and I see all the participants is Indonesian, please allow me to switch to bahasa. Terima kasih. Baik, acara dapat kita lanjutkan kembali karena masih memiliki waktu sampai dengan pukul 15.30. Ada beberapa pertanyaan nih Pak Alkis terkait dengan ini Pak. Saya akan bacakan dari ada pertanyaan tentang concrete story tentang archaeological evidence in Leiden. Mungkin Pak Alkis bisa memberi tanggapan tentang ini karena kebetulan ini kan pernah punya pengalaman di sana Pak. Bagaimana Pak?
Terkait apa ya archaeological evidence in Leiden untuk apa
ada
itu?
cerita tentang concrete story.
Oh, pemanfaatan ini ya, temuan arkeologi untuk sejujurnya yang waktu saya lagi di sana itu pembangunan ini Limes World Heritage ya, jadi tembok Romawi yang dibangun dari Inggris sampai ke Bulgaria, itu kan mau dijadikan World Heritage ya. Nah, salah satunya sebenarnya itu pengen dilihat bagaimana kompleksitas dan pemanfaatan dari bangunan pagarnya itu tembok dari Romawinya itu ya dimanfaatkan untuk modern city planning gitu. Jadi batas kota itu menggunakan tembok-tembok Romawi itu. Seingat saya terakhir begitu ya yang terjadi di Alphen and the Rijn yang di daerah selatan Belanda. Cuman saya selain itu belum pernah sih ya, karena saya ikut satu proyek itu aja terkait hal itu. Itu sih kalau untuk pemanfaatan bagaimana city planning itu dari menggunakan batas-batas kota Romawi pada masa sekarang. Mungkin begitu sih Mbak bisa.
Ada komen lanjutan mungkin dari peserta? Kalau gitu berikutnya ada satu pertanyaan juga tentang bagaimana pengelolaan urban heritage ini bisa berperan dalam pembangunan perkotaan yang berkelanjutan. Mungkin tadi udah sempat disinggung ya sedikit, tapi mungkin Pak punya jawaban lebih dalam tentang ini Pak. Kira-kira bagaimana pengelolaan urban heritage agar berperan dalam pembangunan wilayah kota yang berkelanjutan.
Iya, kalau sekarang dalam konteks Indonesia ya, kan kalau sekarang dalam city planning di kota-kota kan ya, karena saya fokusnya di colonial heritage ya, melihat bahwa ada tren sekarang bahwa untuk melakukan preservasi di bangunan-bangunan kolonial gitu kan, karena sekarang salah satu penggeraknya mungkin memang tourism activity ya, karena di RPJP kita salah satu unsur utama dalam pembangunannya itu adalah pariwisata, sehingga pendorongan preservasi yang dilakukan itu lebih ke arah turisme. Tapi yang bisa kita pelajari juga ketika COVID ini, bahwa tidak selamanya pariwisata bisa resilience gitu kan, sustainable untuk menghidupi berbagai elemen masyarakat gitu. Bisa dilihat waktu di Bali ketika terjadinya ada COVID, pariwisata jatuh, terjadinya perubahan besar secara sosial budaya di Bali. Nah, sekarang pertanyaannya adalah bagaimana menciptakan suatu sosial kapital dari tinggalan-tinggalan di colonial heritage ini yang bisa dimanfaatkan oleh masyarakat untuk pariwisata, tetapi bukan menjadi satu fokus utama dalam melakukan pemanfaatannya gitu. Karena kan bisa kita lihat kasusnya sekarang yang paling parah di Komodo ya, ketika Komodo transisi masyarakatnya pertama memanfaatkan hutan, lalu menjadi cagar alam, keluar di masyarakat diminta untuk berpindah ke laut, sekarang itu menjadi pariwisata, tapi sejak adanya program KSPN ini masyarakat diminta keluar gitu. Nah, sekarang bagaimana pemanfaatan itu dalam konteks kota maupun daerah lainnya tidak memanfaatkan pariwisata dalam satu besar-besaran gitu ya, tetapi juga ada praktis lainnya yang mungkin nanti disebutkan oleh Bu Caroline ya dalam hal itu. Mungkin itu sih Bu Nisa yang bisa
Mungkin
saya tanggapi.
dari para peserta, apakah ada? Kayaknya sebenarnya kita masih punya waktu sampai dengan pukul 15.30 ya. Tapi sepertinya pertanyaan apakah masih ada dari para peserta webinar hari ini? Sambil menunggu mungkin saya ingin memberikan memberikan kesempatan untuk Pak Alkis memilih 2 penanya terbaik Pak untuk mendapatkan buku pada hari ini.
Saya nggak dapat pertanyaan banyak ya Mbak, Bu Caroline yang banyak sebenarnya. Jadi saya kalau disuruh nunjuk saya bingung. Siapa ya? Coba saya scroll dulu ya. Mungkin saya kembalikan ke panitia saja, ke Bu Nisa ya untuk pemilihannya, karena tadi saya juga sempat double zoom ya, jadi saya nggak terlalu mengikuti secara full.
Oke. Nah, ini ada satu lagi pertanyaan untuk Pak Alkis. Seberapa penting proses digitalisasi benda atau manuskrip di saat proses repatriasi saat ini berjalan? Ini dari Mbak Zweta pertanyaan.
Oh, repatriasi koleksi Belanda ya. Penting sekali ya ketika
Ya.
preserve versi documenting itu kan sangat penting banget ya untuk bagaimana kita melakukan step pemanfaatan berikutnya. Apakah nanti kita melakukan konservasi terlebih dahulu karena perubahan iklim lingkungan yang sangat tinggi kan, dari Belanda yang relatif lebih kering masuk ke Indonesia yang kelembapan cuacanya lebih tinggi. Jadi secara prinsip konservasi, dokumentasi, dan digitalisasi pemanfaatan teknologi sekarang untuk preservasi bendanya itu sangat penting. Lalu yang kedua, untuk pemanfaatannya, karena bisa kita tahu bahwa aksesibilitas dari repatriasi ini tidak semuanya akan langsung dipamerkan di museum yang bisa diakses oleh masyarakat ya, tetapi juga nanti mungkin banyak yang masuk akan ke storage yang akan memiliki akses terbatas. Jadi sehingga digitalisasi ini penting banget dan dilakukan sebuah repositori ya, repositori koleksi dari bagaimana akses repatriasi ini tidak hanya terbatas pada koleksi repatriasi, tetapi juga koleksi-koleksi lainnya yang bisa diakses oleh semua elemen masyarakat gitu. Dan digitalisasi itu salah satu langkah yang paling cepat ya dan paling efektif untuk membuat aksesibilitas data terbuka bagi semua elemen masyarakat.
Oke. Ya. Sepertinya sudah lagi.
Oh, itu Bu Mary ya lagi.
Oke.
Apakah hal tersebut juga bisa?
Dan apakah hal tersebut juga bisa diakses
Untuk data Indonesia? Bisa sih, harusnya bisa ya, karena yang saya tahu yang Project Belanda ini kan juga lagi membuat online repository ya buat colonial collection database ya, yang tidak hanya terletak di Belanda saja tetapi juga di daerah-daerah lain di Eropa yang memiliki koleksi Indonesia. Nah, untuk sistem repository sendiri saya juga belum tahu bagaimana ke depannya dan bagaimana nanti apakah yang ada di Indonesia juga akan dimasukkan ke dalam sistem tersebut. Tetapi yang saya tahu nanti semua orang akan memiliki akses tersebut, nanti akan dibuka secara open access gitu datanya untuk semua sivitas yang ingin membutuhkan data tersebut. Mungkin gitu Bu Mary, ada tambahan atau tanggapan?
Tanggapan dari Bu Mary atau dari peserta yang lain? Ada. Baik, karena sudah tidak ada yang bertanya lagi, mungkin saya akan memberikan kesempatan untuk Pak Alkis memberikan pernyataan penutup, Pak, sebelum saya meringkas sesi kegiatan kita hari ini. Silakan.
Ya, terima kasih. Yang pertama, ternyata saya suruh bahasa Inggris karena ada Bu Caroline aja ya. Padahal saya presentasi belum ada Bu Caroline loh. Saya bisa bahasa Indonesia tadi mestinya. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, maaf, saya masih jet lag soalnya di sini. Jadi masih penyelaman ya. Jadi masih narkosis ya. Jadi bahasanya saya masih terbata-bata, masih teler juga di sini. Yang penting sebenarnya kalau terkait urban heritage ya, masih banyak sekali aspek yang bisa kita pelajari ya, karena konsep urban heritage sendiri masih sangat baru di Indonesia, bagaimana melakukan preservasi terhadap tinggalan-tinggalan budaya, sejarah, entah itu dari masa kolonial, masa Islam, Hindu, Buddha, hingga prasejarah, dan bagaimana dimanfaatkannya untuk ke depan. Karena selama ini yang saya tahu di Indonesia konteksnya hanya untuk pariwisata, tetapi bagaimana dengan aspek-aspek lainnya gitu, karena yang paling penting bukan hanya untuk dari economic profit semata, tapi bagaimana heritage dan cagar budaya ini bisa membangun social capital dan cultural value yang lebih baik untuk menciptakan resiliensi dalam pembangunan berkelanjutan di masa depan. Iya, mungkin gitu. Mungkin ada yang pengen ngobrol juga kayaknya tadi nambahin. Begitu, Bu Nisa. Oke,
terima kasih banyak Pak Alkis. Mungkin karena Pak Alkis ini saya mewakili Pak Alkis ya untuk memberikan dua pertanyaan terbaik. Yang pertama itu saya akan pilih Ibu Mary Tambari, dan yang kedua adalah untuk Bapak Farhan Fadilah, Bapak atau Ibu Farhan Fadilah Azari. Oke, Pak.
Ya, saya setuju.
Terima kasih kepada Pak Alki, selamat kepada Pak Stanley, selamat juga kepada Bapak atau Ibu Farhan, terus kemudian untuk Ibu Mary. Bagi para pemenang buku, kami mohon untuk dapat mengirimkan pesan langsung melalui Instagram @leidenindonesia dengan mengirimkan nama, alamat, dan nomor telepon, atau jika memiliki kesulitan dapat langsung mengirimkan message ke saya atau ke Mbak Zueta di platform chat box ini. Beberapa dapat saya simpulkan dari webinar kita kali ini, satu, bahwa historical tidak hanya preservasi historical saja, tapi bagaimana membangun local development itu sendiri. Lalu karena kita harus memberikan meaning pada benar-benar sejarah tersebut. Kemudian adalah bagaimana menciptakan sosial yang bisa dimanfaatkan oleh masyarakat khusus. Masyarakat khususnya dalam proses reservasi ini adalah tugas kita. Berikutnya, jika masih memiliki pertanyaan lanjutan atau ingin berdiskusi kembali lebih lanjut dengan bicara hari ini, kami mengundang Bapak untuk dapat mengikuti kegiatan workshop pada second BRIN-LDE Academy 2023 di Serpong pada tanggal 23 sampai dengan 27 Oktober 2023. Kami tunggunya hanya dengan mengirimkan 300 kata sebelum tanggal 28 Juli. Dan jika membutuhkan informasi lebih lanjut dapat menghubungi panitia atau silakan mengakses s.brin.id. Pada kegiatan workshop ini Anda berkesempatan untuk mempublikasikan artikel Anda jika terpilih. Lalu kemudian bagi Anda yang ingin melanjutkan S3 juga ini dapat menjadi kesempatan yang baik untuk Anda bertemu langsung dengan para calon supervisor, dan juga yang pasti kegiatan ini menambah jejaring Anda. Sekali lagi saya atas nama seluruh panitia BRIN-LDE 2023 dan para narasumber kita pada siang hari ini mengucapkan banyak terima kasih atas partisipasinya dan waktunya untuk bergabung di kegiatan webinar kali ini. Mohon maaf jika ada kekurangan. Selamat siang, selamat berakhir pekan. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bu Nisa, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Izin live.
Terima kasih.